Tennessee Golden Hour. My name is Matt Tullis.
And I'm Beth Moore.
Excited about what we're going to be doing today because we're going to be talking about Sunday school, discipleship, small groups, all that stuff. How has Sunday school, small groups, discipleship, where did that start with you? Your origin story for that?
I'm so thankful for the men and women who taught me Sunday school all throughout my life, but particularly high school and college, because they helped me understand how to read and study the Bible on my own. That equipped me when I was living overseas in a culture and a language that I didn't speak fluently, and I needed to feed myself. And if I hadn't been taught well by Sunday school teachers, I wouldn't have been able to do that.
Fantastic. And we are really excited to have Mr. Small Groups and Sunday School, Ken
Yes.
Braddy, with us from Lifeway. Beth, tell us a little bit about Ken.
Yeah, so Ken currently serves as the Director of Sunday School and Network Partnerships for Lifeway Christian Resources. He's co authored or authored 9 books on group ministry, and he's also served the local church in different capacities in small group ministry. So he is going to be able to offer us just some great information to encourage Sunday school teachers around the state.
That's awesome. Welcome, Ken. We're so excited to have you here.
Thank you, Matt, and thank you, Beth. And Beth, as you were talking about your experience overseas
Yeah.
and that different culture had to learn how to self-feed and all that, I'm thinking, yeah, I think you just described America. We're kind of a different culture these days, and it's like, people have to do that right here at home anymore.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Well, Ken, I want to start off by just asking you, why is small group, Sunday school ministry as important, or maybe even more important than the preaching ministry for a pastor?
So that is a phenomenally good question, Matt. And I was at a conference that I was leading just a few days ago in Georgia and had a room full of pastors. And at one point during the conference, we started talking about, why groups and why Sunday school is so important to their ministries. And I reminded them of some statistics that go along with groups, and tried to prove that point. That groups are equally as important, and maybe even, this is going to sound crazy and heretical, but more important perhaps than even the pulpit ministry of our churches. So let me try to unpack that before people start, charging the Lifeway building with spears and torches and things like that. And I'll start by saying that I love what our pastors do, and absolutely they get that message from the Lord. They deliver that to the church every single week, and that's just is such an important part of their ministry to us as congregants. But if you ever have a strong pulpit ministry in the church coupled with a strong group ministry, then you've got something very special.
Yeah.
And not every church has that. And so that's why I tell pastors, if you can get that group ministry moving in the right direction, it'll be nothing more than just an accelerant, to the growth of your church. And so here's some things that I like to tell them. Groups absolutely propel measurable spiritual growth. I go back to a book that Dr. Brad Wagner wrote. He was our executive vice president under Dr. Rayner. And we commissioned this insanely large survey. It was like 2,500 Protestants. For 2 years, we followed these people and looked at their habits, looked at whether or not they were in groups. And it was determined through that survey that the number one thing that a person could do to posture themselves, Matt, to grow from like this year to next year as a disciple, was to read the Bible regularly, daily.
Yeah.
And at the conference, I said, now you guys can give us the big collective, well, duh, it makes sense, right? Read the Bible daily. But that's what the research says. And lo and behold, if our group ministries don't typically use these little things called study guides, quarterlies, if you've been around for a while, you call them that. And those are designed to help people engage with the Bible, I don't know, daily, And so that part of the ministry actually helps people do what the survey says is the number one thing that propels growth. But we also discovered in that survey that another thing that propels growth is coming to the church's worship service, being under their pastors preaching and teaching and worshiping with their fellow congregants. So that's an important thing. But number 3, right behind it, was regular involvement in a Bible study group.
Mm.
And so if you can get people in groups, reading the word, relating to one another, you have positioned them to grow spiritually. So that's one thing I tell folks. But we also know from another research project, completely different, and another large research project, that people who are in our Bible study groups, as compared to people who are just coming and, going to the worship service and then going to lunch, they're doing church in an hour, basically. The people who are in our Bible study groups, and this is what we know statistically, this is empirical data, they give more money to the church than people who are just coming for that 1 hour of worship. They serve at a deeper level more frequently than people who are just coming to the church's worship service.
Wow.
They pray more and more regularly for lost people. They share their faith more with lost people. They confess sin to one another. That kind of makes sense, in a group setting or a triad type of a setting, than people who don't have that kind of a group setting. And so groups are important for that reason. But there's one more that I like to share. And it was something that Dr. Rayner discovered when he was our CEO. He did a lot of research through Rayner Research. And I think, and I continue to tell folks in conferencing, I think this is some of the most important data that was ever mined about groups. And here it is. And this is what he discovered, if you had 100 new believers, you dropped them off at your church's porch tomorrow, and they came to their first worship service next Sunday. If you look down the corridor of time 5 years to see if they're still engaged in your church, here is the devastating news. If a person does not get involved in a group, you can only find 16 of the 100 in 5 years.
Wow.
The other, they're gone.
Mm.
They're gone. They did not stick. But if a person says, I'm going to come to church, big church, worship with everybody, but I'm also going to take that next step and put myself out there, get involved in a group, get to know people, get in that smaller group setting, you can find 83 out of the 100.
Wow.
And so I love to share that statistic at my church's new member class. I lead that one. And I like to semi-scare parents with that data, to be honest. I do. I say, if you want to mess your kids up, I said, folks, just pay attention. I'll tell you how to do that in the next 30 seconds. Just make church optional. Just come to the late hour worship service, and y'all do church in about an hour. And that'll pretty much do it. And then I share the statistic. And then I say, so do you want to set your children up for a life of church being optional? Do you want to be the parents calling us, when your kids are out of high school and college and now they've walked away from the church and you're all panicking and now they're married and having grandchildren, your grandchildren, and they're not in church?
Mm-hmm.
Or do you want to be the parents that say, we're going to make a commitment today to be in church and to be in groups because we know that it's going to help us and our kids and probably future grandkids stick more in the church? And that's just what groups can do for a church. Groups that are done right and places for people to gather and connect are just so good for the long-term health, spiritual health of the members.
So, you talked a little bit about how our culture is different today. How you've been with Lifeway since 2000, Ken. How have you seen small group Bible study or Sunday school evolve in the time that you've been there and kind of where it is now?
Yeah, well, this is that's a good question, and it's a two-part answer, Beth. Part one is it's accurate, but it's half tongue-in-cheek, but it's not much. It's not much. And here's why I say that. We've got a new survey back right now. It's the biggest post-COVID survey that anybody's ever done on groups in North America. And right now, Lifeway Research and I are dripping out the results of the survey. Here's what we're starting to see in the data. We are still, as a convention of churches, we're still not starting enough new groups. That hadn't changed. And that's disappointing, But that's what the surveys are telling us, is that we're just not doing enough of that. Number two, we are not raising up apprentice leaders. And that's a big problem. During COVID, I was getting phone calls weekly at the Lifeway office. And you remember the days when we all had to be like 6 feet apart when they let us start regathering. Y'all remember that? So
Real fun.
pastors were calling us and saying, hey, our people are finally ready to come back. Government says we can come back 6 feet apart, but we can only get a fraction of our folks in the rooms because, it's 6 feet of distance, and a room that would hold 20 now holds like 5 or 6, So what do we do? And I'd say, hey, this is easy. Don't waste a good pandemic, right? So you start that new group, get that apprentice, start the new group. And then it was like silence on the other end of the phone. And I said, you still there? And they said, yep. And I said, is there a problem? And they said, yeah. And I said, what's the problem? And they said, well, we don't really have anybody to start those groups. I said, you don't have an apprentice? No. I said, what do you have in your groups? And they said, well, most of our groups have a sub. And I said, well, those are two different animals, because a sub does it one off when teacher's out, teacher needs a break, teacher's on vacation, teacher's sick. They really don't position and posture themselves as the next leader of that group. They're kind of a stopgap. But the apprentice is being trained to have his or her own new group. They're looking forward to leading and to having, their own group that they would shepherd. But we found that was, those were few and far between. So across the SBC, we're not starting new groups, but it's a byproduct of us not having apprentice leaders in our groups. And so until we fix that problem is going to continue. And so I can say confidently, what's changed? Well, in that regard, not much, so we really need to get that one back on track. We also discovered in this new survey that churches, like nine out of 10 churches, are not limiting the size of their groups. So if they can get 20 in a room, great. Can you put 10 more, 30? Sure, do it. 10 more, can it top out at 40 or so? Yeah, shove people in there. And that's not very healthy, I don't think, for the long haul health of group. That there is a right size, for groups, for conversations and ministry and those kinds of things. And unfortunately, most of our churches are not starting those new groups, so they just put people in the existing groups, and those sometimes swell and they get big, and sometimes big things aren't healthy things, And so that's something else that we're seeing in real time. It's just not changing much.
So
But here, go
Oh,
ahead.
sorry. I was just thinking that's interesting to me that you say that, because I think of groups that I've been a part of, and when it gets too big, then you run back into the statistic you mentioned, where it's like you only find 16 of the 100 versus 83 of the 100, because when it gets too big, the advantage of a group Bible study and getting to know people is lost, and
Absolutely.
and that very thing.
Yeah, people can hide out.
Yeah.
And then unfortunately, when something does happen in their lives, we don't know it. And if we don't know it, then we can't minister and we can't reach out. And so it's easy for a person to start to feel a little neglected, a little outside the circle, and it makes it easy to walk away, to not get up on a Sunday and go and just say, I think we'll skip today. And then all of a sudden they've missed a few weeks, and then it turns into a couple of months. And then we wonder, well, where's the Johnny Buford family? Well, that's they just slowly drifted away. It's hard to do that in what I would call a right-sized group, because you notice their absence, and in theory, they're going to be reached out to quickly, and the reason ascertained, and normally it's pretty benign. Hey, I was tired, overslept, or work called me in today. It's not like I walked away from the church or anything. It's just like an odd one-off kind of a thing. But it is good, though, that they realize that when they're gone, somebody notices and somebody follows up, and it kind of encourages them to be there next time, right? So those were a couple things we see that are not changing. What has evolved, Beth? I'd say a couple things. One of the things that COVID did to the church that was really good was that it taught us that Sunday school does not have to happen on Sunday. And I think that's a good thing, because the name Sunday school could lead people to think, well, it happens 9 to noon on a Sunday, right? That'd be fair. But COVID taught us, well, if you can get a group together on a Sunday afternoon or an evening or a weekday morning or weeknight, wherever you can have people that were willing to meet and you got some space, let them do it. And we all of a sudden realized, hey, you know what? That frees up some other spaces on Sunday morning to start some new groups. And we just don't have to do it on Sunday. I think that was a good thing the church learned. And it has caused some churches to expand their thinking about when groups can and should meet. So that was a really good thing. But here's one that I think I can safely say is a good evolving trend in the group world. I have never seen I've been with Lifeway now almost 15 years. I have never seen a higher level of interest in training than I have right now. Everything that we're doing is packed out. And I'm watching events like the Spark conference over with the Georgia Baptist Mission Board, 5 regional events around their state, packed out. I look at my home state of Texas and the 2 conventions there doing their workshops and trainings, and those things are packed. We just did a Sunday school, or we've renamed it now, Group Essentials Conference, a 2-day conference for pastors and other leaders over their group ministries, and we keep that one kind of on the small side to about 36 or so people. It's kind of what I would call boutique training, but we're very intense. 10 hours of training in the course of 2 days. And those have packed out, and we've got waiting lists, and we've never seen this before. So I think this is a great trend. What's it caused by? I don't know. Maybe our church leaders have recognized that in this post-COVID world that we're in, we almost all right now have a chance to hit the big reset button, Beth. And whatever we were in group ministry before COVID, we can be different and better in a post-COVID world. I think that's part of it.
Think of me as a pastor who has a church that is struggling with Sunday school and small groups. Could you give me a few examples of something I could do to kick it up a notch as far as my small group ministry?
Yes, buy my book, Breathing Life into Sunday School.
All right. You see it in the comments section down there.
That's fun. And I probably need to say this as a disclaimer. I take no royalties on any of the books that I write. And Beth, you called attention to, I've written about 9 of them. I've got 2 or 3 more in process right now. And it's just one of my favorite things that I get to do through my perch at Lifeway is to write and perhaps influence, broadly, some thinking about groups. So no money comes to me, but I do think that the content, Matt, of that particular book is helpful because it was written for people in Sunday schools that were kind of like on life support, a little stuck, not moving forward. And what are some things that we can do to move forward?
Now, which book was it?
It was called Breathing Life into Sunday School.
Great. Okay.
Now, here's the good news. The last time I checked at lifeway.com, they were running some incredibly insane flash sale on it. It had retailed for like $12, $13 initially, and it was down to like $3.98 or something, So either it's fixing to go out of print, and they haven't told me, or they've got some in the warehouse that they're just trying to clear out and make some space. But either which way, it's still a great deal, a great bargain. 12 different essentials, for breathing life into your group ministry. So Matt, let's get back to your question. What would I say to a pastor? I would say to our pastors broadly, you've got to talk and call attention to Sunday, talk about it more and call attention to it more than you're doing. I think that we probably overestimate people's understandings of like, what's my next step? And if a pastor will regularly talk about the church's group ministry, and we want you members and guests to find that right group, and we're committed to helping you do that. Come talk to us at the greeter ministry station. Talk to somebody in the worship service and ask them, hey, can you help me get into your group? We look like we're the same age. How do we go about that? But you've got to talk about it and call attention to it. And to the point, Matt, that, we would say it's just overkill. But at that point that you feel like you've said it for the umpteen hundredth time, And do we really need to say this anymore? Somebody out there in the congregation just heard it for the first time, you know? And so if it becomes important to the pastor, the church picks up on that and it becomes important to the church.
Mm.
So that's a free thing. All right. It costs no money to do this, And
Yeah.
so it's a freebie. In fact, most of the things in the book uh, don't really cost any money to do. It's just some common sense things like that. So I'd say first, call attention to it. Make sure people know what their options are, right? I would also say this, Matt, and we may get into this with some other questions y'all have, but um, the best thing that our churches can do is to start new groups, because they are so much easier for newer people to get assimilated into than sending them to a group that's been together, 2 or more years, because that's tough. Most groups at about the 2-year mark that they've been together, they calcify and they turn inward and they don't think about guests as much. And that's just a byproduct of them doing what we've asked them to do.
And it might be helpful to maybe have a few chairs left over in the room.
Pretty good thought, Matt, because my wife and I have actually visited groups where the group had no extra chairs. We stood at the front right there, pretty awkward, while somebody ran down the hall to the next classroom or two, found some chairs and brought them back.
Ugh.
It's just awkward. And in some of those same groups, they don't even have enough extra study guides that they're using to give to us as guests. And so we just kind of, fumble along in our Bibles, kind of figure out where they are. But
Right.
everybody in the room's reading quotes and comments in their study guide. And we're over here, wish we could do that. So yeah, it's just little things like that can turn a guest on or off, and unfortunately, some of our groups are just not ready and thinking about having guests among them.
Yeah. What are
Yeah.
some other ways? I mean, I know for myself as a single, when I moved to
Mm-hmm.
Nashville and started visiting churches after having grown up, gone to seminary, served overseas, it was hard. I did not like it sometimes. And so I know for people who maybe aren't as committed to just finding that place to get plugged in, it's even more difficult. So how can we do a better job of making people feel welcome and connected into a group?
Yeah, so I can approach that, Beth, from my perch as a group leader,
Hmm.
because I lead a group and have Tammy and I've started a couple of groups at our churches here in Tennessee. And we made a very strong commitment to be a very welcoming Bible study group, because we did not have the greatest experiences when we were visiting churches trying to get plugged in. And I thought, if I ever start a group, we will never do that to people, right? So one thing that we did, this was my wife's job in the group, part of it, when we got to the classroom, she would have a little plastic box, I guess is the best word for it, plastic container from like Staples, the office supply store, with "Hello, my name is" name tags in them, peel and stick. And she'd put one in every chair, and she'd put a big fat marker about every other chair. And our people from day one were trained to come in, write their name, stick it on, that kind of thing. And we did that for a long time. And finally, I had a guy named Phil in one of my classes said, "Hey, can I ask you a question before you start teaching?" And I said, "Sure. What's up, Phil?" And he goes, "Why do you make us wear these dumb name tags every week?" He goes, "We know who we are." And I said, "Well, this is a good question." I'm thinking, okay, now what do I do with this guy? I like Phil, but he's challenged me in front of the group. So do I smack him? Do I get smart alecky? And I said, no. To myself, I'm like, okay, this is a teachable moment. So I looked at him and I go, "Phil, great question." And I said, "You are correct. Today, we have no guest in our group. We know who we are. We're a home crowd. But because we are an open group and we are open to new people coming any particular Sunday, I can never know when you're going to invite a coworker or a neighbor, or when somebody from the guest information center here at the church is going to walk somebody to our room. And we want to know who they are, and we want them to know who we are." And I said, "Phil, I've actually met people and by the end of class forgot their name. And I hate going, hey, thanks for being here in our class today, brother, because that's always code for I forgot your name.
Yeah.
So I said, name tags help us remind ourselves that we are supposed to be an open group that expects new people every week. And he looked at me and I kind of braced and I thought, because he was my critical thinker in the group. And he looks at his wife and looks at me, and I'm looking at my wife and going, where's this fixing to go? And he just looks at me and goes, okay, good, thanks. That's great. Appreciate the explanation. And but it was a good reminder to the group that for us to be a more welcoming group, it is so good to be able to call people by their names, right?
Yeah.
The other thing we did is I told the group, I said, anytime we have a guest, and our group was in the habit of going to lunch every single Sunday.
Okay.
Started out once a month, but somebody in the group says, we eat lunch every Sunday. Why not just do it as a group if we want to? So not everybody would go every Sunday. That wasn't the requirement, but it was a standing date for our group at noon on a Sunday. And we just pick a different restaurant. And you know how easy that made it to assimilate new people that were visiting our group? We would just tell them, hey, look, we're going right from here to Zaxby's or right from here to, and just, name the restaurant, and we'd love for y'all to come. How about it? Well, chances are they're going to eat too, right? Somewhere. And we almost never got turned down. So when they would come and we were sitting, let's say at Chili's, which was kind of the frequent place we like to go because it's a variety of stuff on the menu, somebody in the group would tell the waitress, give me their check. And the guest would get their lunch paid for by somebody random in the group every week. And they got excited about it. It was kind of like, okay, who's going to fight over paying for the guest? This little badge of honor kind of a thing. But they did it because they wanted the guests to know we genuinely were happy that they were in our group. And we were really hoping they would come back to our group. And that was a big part of, I'm talking this simple stuff.
Right.
But things that most groups just don't do, right? And then here's my pet peeve. When Tammy and I were visiting churches when we first moved to Nashville, trying to find a church, trying to find a group, we would visit groups like we visited one around Christmas time. And I sat in a circle right next to the group leader who I think it was the second Sunday in December of 2010, said to the group of about 30 people, don't forget, tonight we're having our big ornament exchange. The dirty Santa ornament exchange, bring an ornament, we'll fight over them, trade them 3 times, then it's yours. Go. So I'm looking at my wife going, this is so good. We've been looking for a church and for a group for 6 months now. And guys, Beth, Matt, they did not invite us to their fellowship that night.
Man.
That was for the home. It was for the home crowd, evidently, not the guests. And I'm like, oh man. And honestly, that was the last time we went to that church and to that group. We moved on.
Yeah.
So just including guests, inviting them to the fellowships, inviting them to lunch, giving them a study guide, Matt, making sure they've got a chair. This is not rocket science,
Right.
but I am constantly amazed how many groups need to be reminded that just those little things make a big difference. And somebody in the group got to step up and do it. Yeah. If it's not the teacher, it's somebody else. Either there's a person in the group that's designated like the class greeter or something that makes that happen, or everybody in the group has to collectively own that process. But you guys know how that goes. If it's everybody's job, it becomes nobody's job.
Right.
That's why I'm a big fan of having a person or couple that's their job, is they're supposed to help the guests get assimilated.
Yeah. Speaking of the Sunday school teacher, what are some ways that Sunday school teachers can help their people in their group take ownership over their spiritual health?
Over their spiritual health. Yeah. So I think one of the best things that a group can do, and we're doing this right now at my church at Bel Air, and that's in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, just we're south of Nashville. We have a plan, our discipleship pathway. Part of the pathway are D groups, discipleship groups. So those are same sex. They meet for most of the year, once a week, in groups of about 3 to 4 people. And we believe that brings a high level of accountability, a level of scripture memory, some maybe ministry in the community, but the sharing of life at a little bit deeper level where we are challenging one another in a good way, to make sure that we are practicing spiritual disciplines. How's your prayer life?
Mm.
How's your Bible reading? Are you participating in a group?
Mm.
And so we are now going to channel the D group ministry through what we call our life group ministry, Sunday school. And so no longer will we just have this, hey, we have a D group ministry, but we will now use the Sunday school, the life groups, to create those D groups within each of those Sunday school classes.
That's
And
good.
our theory is, and I think it's going to be right, is that if you just hear us say, "Hey, come be a part of a D group," well, somebody's got to raise their hand, say, "I want to do that." Then we got to pair them up, or triad them up, or quad them up with other people, and maybe they like those people and they stick, and maybe they don't. You know how it is. Sometimes we just don't gel. But if you're in a Bible study group and you say, look, we really want you guys to be together, guys and gals, guys in a group, gals in a group. And all you have to do is just find a couple other people in the group that are like-minded that want to do that. Well, typically the first people they look for are their friends in the group.
Mm-hmm.
And we think that we're going to have much higher success numbers-wise when we implement that starting in 2025. So, Matt, I'd say one of the ways that a group leader can help the people is by that, by thinking about channeling a D group ministry through, through their regular ongoing group ministry. But also think, having testimonies of people that are growing and asking them to talk about, hey, what have you learned this quarter as you have, been on a Bible reading plan? And that may be somebody's encouragement in the group. Bible reading plan? What? We're supposed to be reading the Bible? And they get to hear a peer talk about the benefits of, being in the Word daily. Maybe they've never thought about doing that, but they're like, well, if Johnny Buford over here, can do it, well, I can do that too. So I like the idea of just regularly incorporating testimonies from group members and not saying, well, look, I'm the teacher, you should do this. I think it's good for them to hear it from a peer that is practicing spiritual disciplines. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what are some, we talked about there's obviously a shortage of leaders. We know that pastorally speaking, but even as you said, among group leaders, what are some qualities to look for in a gifted or just a good Bible study leader?
Okay, another great question. So, Beth, I think what I would say first is the person, well, let me say it this way. Back in the day, when I was a younger minister of education, right, than I am today, I had a theory that what I needed to do in order to have a great, growing, healthy, rocking and rolling Sunday school was to have the absolute best teachers in the church as adult group leaders. And so I looked for those people that, could hold their own with, some of our best teachers in the church, the pastor, or I think I was a pretty good teacher, so I'm not talking like they're not in seminary, but, these are very gifted, probably have that spiritual gift of teaching and knowledge that you read about in Scripture. And that's who I look for. And over the years, as I look back, honestly, they didn't make the greatest teachers. They just didn't. Their groups sometimes struggled. And I think sometimes that's because those teachers, in their gifting and using that gift, they do a lot of talking and a lot of, hey, I'm kind of the expert, you listen to me kind of stuff. So
Right.
all that to say, one of the qualities that I want today in a teacher is I want somebody who is a shepherd teacher. There's a shepherd mindset. They're typically not the best teachers in the church. They are, like think about school, they're like a B or B plus or B minus kind of a teacher, right? They're not going to kill you,
Right.
but they're probably not going to, knock it out of the park every single Sunday, right? However, they more than make up for that on the ministry side.
Mm.
And people know that this teacher loves them to death. In fact, if there's a hospital, surgery kind of a thing, normally that teacher has already been there before I can get there as a staff person. They just love their people. Those shepherd teachers, they smell like their sheep.
Mhm.
They're around their people, and to me, That's one of the best qualities, is somebody who just loves people. Are you with me on that one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I can take a teacher like that who is a B level type teacher, and with proper training, I can teach them how to become a better teacher,
Mhm.
skill wise. But then I've still got them as a shepherd
Right.
teacher, and now I've got something very special.
Yeah.
It's really hard, I discovered, to take that teacher that's like A plus kind of teacher, and say, hey, you need to love your people. You know? Good luck with that one. And
Yeah.
so I would rather have the teacher that is less skilled and turn them into a better teacher, but they've already got that heart for people. And our research, I'll shout out to Scott McConnell over at Lifeway Research. He released a book mid-pandemic based on some research that they had done, and it's called Together, the Power of Groups. And the book looked at two things. Why do people come to groups? Why do they join? And why do they leave? So that's pretty good information, right? That a person, pastor, somebody's going to want to know. A teacher ought to want to know that, right? Why do people come to my group and why do they leave? Well, here's what we discovered. The number one reason why people leave a group, we have no control over.
Mm.
And it's because there's a life change. So, Matt, somebody dies. That makes it pretty hard to keep coming, so they can't come. They move away. Their work changes their schedule. Now they got to work on Sunday mornings. We have zero control over that, right? But the second most important reason why people leave is because the group ended. That's why we say on Sunday mornings, do not have start and stop groups like you would maybe on a Wednesday night. Don't do short-term stuff, 4, 8, 10, 12 weeks. Make these groups in prime time ongoing groups. They meet every Sunday, best thing you can do. In that same research project, we discovered that 97% of the people in groups are very happy with their group leader. Only 3% ever leave because the teacher's not doing what they would consider a great job.
Mm-hmm.
So in the book, Scott makes this statement, and it's pretty sobering. He said, given that only 3% of people are not happy with their group leader, he asked the question, he says, is it possible that churches who are being highly selective in choosing group leaders are being too selective? He said, are there more people possibly that could be released into group leadership given that only 3% of people are unhappy with their group leaders? I think it's a great question. And I think the answer is yes, because our churches have more C and B level teachers and folks, right, than we do A and A plus levels. So we might look at those folks and say, well, they're a B or a C. I'm going to hold out for the A, rather than I'm going to enlist the B and turn them into an A over time.
Yeah.
Because they love people and they're good. So it's a long answer to the question, but I think that shepherding heart, Beth, is really, really important, an important quality to have. So can I say one more thing about that? Matt, you want to jump in and say something else? So I'd tell your listeners, if you don't believe me on this one just yet, it's okay. Let me try to convince you. Amos 3:12. Amos 3:12. Probably not a passage any of us have read devotionally in a long time, right? Amos,
Yeah.
minor prophet. There's Amos, shepherd by trade, right? And he also, chapter 7, it says that he cared for sycamore trees. So, bivocational guy, trees and sheep. In chapter 3, verse 12, he is delivering an oracle from the Lord to the people. And in it, he makes this statement. Here's what he says. I'm going to quote you verse 12. He says, as the Lord says, or as the shepherd snatches 2 legs or a piece of an ear from the lion's mouth, so the people of Samaria be rescued with only the corner of their beds or the cushion of the couch. And the prophecy goes on in verse 10. So I was reading that one day and went down another verse, and then my brain just said, stop. Wait, what? What'd you just read? So I went back up to verse 12, that first part. As the shepherd snatches 2 legs or a piece of an ear from the lion's mouth. Well, my question became, what in the world is a shepherd doing snatching pieces of a dead sheep away from a lion? That's an apex predator. I've actually, we probably all petted a dog on the head while he's eating, and sometimes the reaction is not awesome. You think I'm going to go mess with a lion who has already killed one of my sheep? I mean, I can't save it. It's dead. He got it. And now I'm fighting this lion over pieces. And so my question became, why in the world would a shepherd do this? That's insanity. Just go the other direction. Lion got it. Let him have it. Don't put your life at risk. And so I began wondering why. So I started looking at commentaries. Nobody addressed it, that kind of thing. And it bugged me. I couldn't figure it out. And in time, I finally came up with this idea of what the shepherd was doing. And it was only, no kidding, it was only like 2 years ago when I was leading a conference and I talked about this, that a guy in the back of the room says, the explanation you just gave about that verse, he goes, that's exactly right. And I said, how do you know that? And he said, because I just took a class in seminary on Amos, and that's what the professor said. And I'm like, woohoo! I got one right, And here's my theory. This is what I had said to the group. I said, I think that the shepherd was so passionate about taking dead pieces of a sheep away from an apex predator because he's not the owner. Mm. And if he goes out with 30 sheep, Matt, he better come back to the owner with 30 sheep. If he's got 29, he better have a good explanation because the sheep aren't his. Are you with me?
Right.
So if the shepherd shows up with 29 and his master says, well, where's the 30th? He has to reach into his satchel and pull out a bone or a piece of an ear to prove he didn't go take that sheep and go start his own flock. He understands the ownership flow, right? He's not the owner. He is temporary a steward. Mm-hmm. I say all that to say, Beth, you asked the question, what quality would you look for? A shepherd's heart that gets this particular verse. Here's why. In every church I've served, and I've served in some really good, strong Sunday school churches, but I have had people in every church put fingers in my face, no kidding, and tell me don't ever come into their class and split their group. Don't ask to take away their best people to start those new groups. They've worked too hard to build up their group. Y'all hear the emphases here? Mm-hmm. They do not understand this shepherding concept from Amos 3:12. It's not their class. It's not their group. It's not their classroom. Those are God's people. Those are his sheep, right? And just like this shepherd understands the ownership chain and his stewardship job, I think one of the best qualities in a Sunday school teacher is that they understand that. Mm-hmm. They are simply, for this moment, as long as the Lord leaves them in this role, they are caring for his sheep. They're the shepherd of the group, but it's not their people. So they hold on to them, with a very loose grip. And when we need to start those new groups, they should say, absolutely not mine in the first place. Take all you want, that kind of thing. And I find that kind of absent in a lot of group leaders' thoughts about their role. Sometimes they feel like their role is, I got to get bigger, we got to get more people. And it kind of becomes a badge of honor. Look, I've got the biggest class in the church. I would prefer you to have more of a small to medium group because you just keep sending people out, to fill in and become teachers and leaders in other parts of the church. And to say, hey, we love it when the church comes and asks people to leave, and we encourage them to do that because honestly, they're not my people in the first place. Right. And that's the mentality I've tried to take into it as a group leader. And I tell my group, I don't want some of you to be in here next year. You need to go serve. So when you hear them talking about needing some help in the preschool ministry, or they need help, starting some new adult groups, please be the people that leave my group. We'll love you, and we'll think about you, and we'll pray for you. But I don't ever say, don't leave my group, because I'm smart enough to know it's not my group. Yeah. I'm serving for the Lord. I'm just a shepherd temporarily until he says I'm not.
That's great. Well, Ken, I want to role play with you just for a second again. Let's just assume that I'm a pastor who just dropped into Emmanuel Baptist Church and have no context of Lifeway. I'm from First Presbyterian Holy Ghost Church on the Lake.
Got it.
And I'm here, and then all of my people are saying, we really think we need to use Lifeway curriculum. And I'm trying to figure out, well, what is this stuff? What life and Bible studies for exploring?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What you offer.
I got you. Yeah. So this is one of my favorite topics. I'll do this pretty quick.
Okay.
And I'm going to set it up like this. When my mom was living and we would go see her, take a weekend trip out to Abilene, Texas, My younger son typically was able to go with my wife and I. So it was the three of us go to see my mom. Mom had a little steak restaurant that she liked there in Abilene, and we go take her out. But I had to put her on one end of the table and my younger son, Ryan, on the far end of the table because they had different philosophies of steak. Mom's was very well done. I'm talking like probably like, boot tough. Somebody told her at one point, don't eat meat that's got blood in it, make you sick. So she took them literally, and that's how she, ate her steak. On the other end of the table, Ryan's like, bring mine medium rare. So, when he gets his, it's swimming in a pool of little blood. Tammy and I are kind of the middle of the road. We're more of the, medium well, a little bit of pink, that kind of thing. And so if you asked us all at the end of the dinner, how was your steak? We would all say fantastic because we like our steak a different way. So when it comes to the Bible studies that Lifeway offers for ongoing groups, Matt, it's kind of like that. People like to eat their Bible study steaks differently. Some groups really like doing it kind of like our pastors, many of our pastors do, and it's a book by book type of a study because our pastors do book by book preaching, and that just kind of makes sense, and it feels like that's the right way to study the Bible. That's how they want to eat their Bible study steak. And for that group, we've got to explore the Bible. It goes through all 66 books in 9 years. And it's really a three-year sequences where every 3 years there is a great balance between prophetic, books of poetry, books of history, the epistles, the gospels, and wisdom literature. So we balance it out for the 9 years so that you've got a healthy, steady, varied diet.
So it's not chronological or anything like that.
It's not chronological. Yeah, we bounce back and forth between Old and New Testament books, typically. So one quarter is Old Testament, next quarter is New, but not chronological. So that leads me then to the baby brother right now, and that's Gospel Project. And Gospel Project will go through the entire Bible, Genesis to Revelation, in 3 years. Now, if Explore the Bible does it in 9, you can imagine how fast we're going in Gospel Project. So we can't even touch on every verse in Explore the Bible. It takes almost 50 years to do that at 15 verses a week.
Wow.
Nobody wants that. So that's why we don't cover every verse for that reason. Not afraid to cover the verses. We just physically can't get it done in the 9 years. So we compromise and we hit the major themes of all the books and Explore the Bible. Gospel Project came along and we realized that we've got a lot of folks that are biblically illiterate in our churches. They don't understand how the Bible connects itself to, the books of the Bible connects themselves to other books of the Bible or to the Gospels or to Jesus and his ministry. So Gospel Project came along and every lesson's very gospel centered. We spend 1.5 years in the Old Testament, 1.5 years in the New, but it is chronological. So starting in Genesis, ending in Revelation. And it's a nice intro, a nice foray into what's the big meta narrative in Scripture. So it really is helpful. It's very helpful right now. A lot of our kid and student ministries like it. So think about this. If a church chose to do Gospel Project with their kids ministry and student ministries, those kids will have been through the Bible like 4 times before they graduate high school. Not a bad play, right?
Yeah.
Not a bad play at all. But that's Gospel Project. And then there's Bible Studies for Life, which is a topical approach to Bible studies. So that's designed in 6-week studies around a particular topic. And then it moves on to another 6-week topic. And it is hyper discussion centered. So if you're a lecturing teacher, you're not going to like it because it's built around 5 really strong discussion questions every week. And there are a few extras in the leader guide if you feel like you need some more. But I've taught Bible Studies for Life. And if my group can get through all 5 questions in 45 minutes, and I'm guiding the rest of the study, we're doing really good. So folks go, oh, is 5 questions enough? More than enough. We could probably trim it back to 4 and be okay. But that just shows you how they're all different, but they're all going to get Bible study done, and Bible study groups can eat steak however they want to. So however they like to do it, chronological, topical, or book by book, we should have an answer for them.
That's
Yeah.
great.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Ken, It has been so good chatting with you. Just as we kind of wrap up, I would love for you to offer maybe words of encouragement that you might have to the discouraged leader that might be listening today and is just trying to think, what can I do?
So I think we can end on this one. I'm going to go back to my mom. Mom, her last couple of years of life, struggled with dementia and Alzheimer's and a touch of cancer. So kind of had this little triple whammy. And they told us, she doesn't have a lot of time left, about a year or so, they thought. And so the family and I tried to, serve and minister to her, during that last year. Well, she passed just before COVID started, and we had the funeral. And the thing I'll tell you about Mom is that when she first got married, she was very hopeful because my dad was enrolled in seminary. He was preparing to be a pastor. That was the life she wanted. And something bad happened in my dad's life, and he got very sideways with the church and with the Lord and walked away from church. I don't remember my dad being a church-going person other than Easter, Christmas. He was that guy. But had been to seminary. He was trained to be a pastor, but got really tripped up. And so at her funeral, the person who was eulogizing her, the pastor of this church, mentioned as he was there at that pulpit, I was in the front row with my wife and my sister, and he's going through my mom's life story, saying nice things about her. Then he opens this notebook that I never knew existed, Beth. And it is my mom's life story that she typed up before she started losing her memory. She realized it was slipping. And he got to this one page, and my mom was talking about the importance of Sunday school. And she said, I feel sorry for kids that don't grow up in church or in Sunday school. She says, you'll discover and nurture a love for the Lord and for the church that just never goes away. I thought that's a nice sentiment. Mm-hmm. And then he turns the page and Mom continues, and she says, because of teachers like Helen Jensen, who led her to the Lord as a third grade girl. She said some of those teachers are still teaching at University Baptist Church, Abilene, Texas today. That was the first time that I ever knew that Helen Jensen lived and took up space and time on planet Earth. Had no clue that she'd ever lived before. First time I'd heard her name. But obviously very important to my mother and my mother's spiritual journey. So when my father made some bad mistakes in their marriage and Mom divorced him because of marital infidelity, Mom just chose to be single and to spend her life serving the Lord in her church. And that's what she did. And then I discovered that Mom got put on a discipleship pathway with the Lord that literally changed her life. And she made sure that my sister and I, even though my dad didn't go to church, they made sure, Beth, that we were in church on Sundays, my sister and I. And so now I look back at this lady named Helen Jensen and I say, Lord, thank you, because the gospel changed my mom and Mom's commitment to your son changed my life. Now, the life that my mom wanted with a preacher husband, she didn't get. But the pastor of that church where my mom's funeral was taking place loved my mom fiercely. And his name is Dr. Ron Brown. He's my brother-in-law. So my sister got the life that Mom wanted. And today they are still married, great ministry in Burleson, Texas, just south of Fort Worth. And Ron loved my mom deeply as her son-in-law. And so Mom got to see that. Mom didn't have a husband that entered ministry, but she was there when I surrendered to ministry that Sunday night at Tate Springs Baptist Church in Arlington, Texas, and loved what the Lord had done in my life. And as a family, I'm going to wrap up on this. I look back and I say, Lord, thank you for Helen Jensen that I never met, who was a West Texas Sunday school teacher teaching third grade girls that the gospel changed my mom's life, and then it changed our family's life and trajectory. So here's what I want to say to the listeners. You've asked, about, a word of encouragement. Here's what I want to tell you, and this is truer than anything I could say today. What you are doing, whether you believe it or not, it is making a difference, because I believe every church has Helen Jensen's all over them that are sharing the gospel, investing in people. And, quite honestly, we may never know the extent of their ministry and what they've done and said to people. But God is using that to change lives for eternity. It's changed mine, my sisters, my sons, and now my grandkids. So Helen Jensen, thank you. Here's the cool thing. I got to wrap up on this. I know we're out of time. I just recently discovered that Helen Jensen's family lives, are you ready for this? In Burleson, Texas, just a couple miles from my sister and her husband.
Wow.
So this Christmas, I am taking one of my books where I wrote about Helen, and I'm going to take it to their home, show up on their porch. I'll be this random crazy guy going, hey, if y'all are related to Helen, boy, do I have something to share with you. And
That's
so I'm looking
awesome.
forward to meeting her family and just telling her sons or maybe even her grandkids, whoever's there, your grandmother, your mom made a huge difference in my life. I just want you to know I'm thankful. So that's what I want to tell pastors and other leaders is you're making a bigger splash and a bigger difference than you probably know. So keep up the God work. Don't give up.
That's awesome. What a way to end.
Mm-hmm.
Great story there. Ken, if our folks want to get in contact with you, tell us about your website and your point of contact.
Yeah, so I've got a website. It's just KenBraddy, BRADDY.com. I've been doing that one since 2011 after coming to Lifeway. And it's free to follow. I don't make any money for it. I just like writing. And so about every week or so, I'm putting out some articles on group ministry, and there's a search bar. So if you've got a topic that you want to know about, did I write about it? Could you use it to maybe help you jumpstart some training in your church? Just use the search bar. Then I've got some links to books and things that I think will be helpful, for like a teacher's library kind of a thing. Again, I don't make any money for it. They link over, I think, mostly to Amazon, but again, I just do it for a hobby and to be helpful, to group leaders. So KenBraddy.com.
And he's got a podcast.
I do have a podcast called Disciple Making in Community. And we release that we release it in 7 episode seasons around one central topic. And I usually have 2 to 3 guests on each episode where we dive into that topic for 7 sessions, but different angles, so we're not repeating the same thing every week. So yeah, Disciple Making in Community with Ken Braddy. You can go to lifeway.com, type that in, or you can just Google it and you'll find it. It's available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, just about anywhere you get a podcast. Just look for Disciple Making in Community. Yeah, thanks for mentioning that.
You bet. Ken Braddy, Lifeway, thank you so much for joining us. And if you want some more information, or if you need to remember a few things that Ken shared about resources, it's down in the show notes. Thank you for liking and subscribing this podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, please share it with a friend. But again, thank you so much, Beth, and thank you, Ken.